Loop antennas have always been pretty popular in ham radio stations. The quad antenna particularly has been very popular. I'm going to talk today about an antenna that I'd forgotten about. An antenna that could be an ideal antenna, particularly for 10 metres. A DX antenna that fits into a small garden with a little bit of gain. You can have some fun with this antenna. It's known as the rectangular loop. Let me tell you a bit more about it. Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Waters and Stanton video channel. The rectangular loop. You know, I'd forgotten about that. In fact, I'm not even sure that I've ever tried it. Mike, G3SED, reminded me very recently about the rectangular loop, and it was an antenna that he used many years ago when he was in his infancy in terms of amateur radio, and he used this antenna to great effect, and he got himself a couple of bamboo canes, which is what we used to use many years ago. You know, when we used to build cubicle quads, we used to use bamboo canes. That was before fiberglass tubing became more plentiful and available at reasonable prices. Anyway, he built this antenna, and he reminded me how good it was and what results he got from it. And I looked at it and I thought, well, yes, I can see the attraction. You know, at the moment, the 10-metre amateur band is very lively. It's open most days, and it's quite amazing what you can work with modest antennas, modest power. And just to prove the point, I switched my radio on. It's just getting dark now, and the band was still wide open to the USA.
About 1,900 feet above sea level. As you drive north, you just get higher and higher. And you took the Grand Avenue.
It reminds me of the days when I was first licensed back in 1960, when we'd just gone past the sunspot maximum and 10 metres was wide open. But you still need an antenna. And with the proliferation of small gardens, it's always a bit of a problem. Well, the rectangular loop may be the answer, particularly if you want to get on 10 metres. And I say particularly on 10 metres for two reasons. First of all, the band is open, it's very good, propagation is excellent. And secondly, the dimensions of a 10-metre antenna are quite small. Now, this antenna starts off as basically a loop, although in amateur radio terms, when we refer to loops, we don't always refer to circular loops. We refer to square loops, don't we? And the basic square loop has got sides which are the same length. Basically, it's a wavelength of wire. So on the 20-metre band, we'd have 20 metres wire, and we'd make it into a loop, which would be cut at one point to feed it. Otherwise, it would be a continuous circuit, and each side will be 5 metres. Well, quite clearly, if we transfer that down to 10 metres, we're going to have sides which are only 2.5 metres. Wait a minute, we can make it even smaller. Let me explain. So here's our square loop, and we can feed that square loop at the bottom with coax cable. It becomes horizontally polarized. We can feed it on one of the vertical sides and it becomes vertically polarized. But we'd have a bit of a problem because the feed impedance of a square loop is around about 100-125 ohms, so it's not a very good match to 50 ohm coax. We can, however, achieve a match by using a quarter wave stub of 75 ohm coax, and if you're fortunate enough to have something like the RigExpert, you can measure yourself out a quarter wave stub of 75 ohm coax, and then at the end of that stub you attach as much 50 ohm coax as you need to get back to the shack. Now, I should explain that when we're talking about loops today, we're talking about loops that are in the vertical plane. In other words, that's the loop there, that's the ground below, and the skies above. So we've got a vertical loop in that plane, not a horizontal loop, but a vertical loop. And also the maximum point of maximum radiation is broadside through the envelope, actually, yeah. It's broadside, so the maximum radiation comes out of the envelope like that or through the other side. We don't spend too much on graphics, do we, on this channel? Now, we can perform quite a neat trick. If we change the shape of the square into a rectangle, we achieve a very good match for 50 ohm coax. In other words, we haven't got to bother with that 75 ohm matching section. We need to establish a ratio of 2:1 between the long side and the short side of the rectangle, and then we get a very good match in 50 ohm coax. It's quite a neat trick, isn't it? So let's now take a look at the revised shape of this loop and see how we may be able to fit it into a small garden. If I can make a quick shout out for Waters and Stanton. This channel is run for Waters and Stanton and is run by me personally, Peter Waters, and we support the ham radio hobby around the world. And of course we've got a lot of customers in the UK who come to us on a regular basis. If you haven't visited us before, don't forget we're at Milton Keynes now. We're very close to the M1, but if you can't reach us, you can always go onto our website, or you can also pick up the phone. We've got some great deals. We've got a wide range of products, probably the widest range of products in the UK. And if you're overseas, we're quite happy to ship overseas as well. So take a look at our website, keep in touch with us, because we've supported the amateur radio business for the last 50 years. And if you're serious about experimenting with antennas, I would recommend the RigExpert. I use one myself. It's a really powerful instrument, and if you're only interested in HF, they do a budget class one just for HF. So check that out. Now, back to the antenna, the rectangle antenna. The first loop, or the first rectangular loop I'm going to look at, is the vertical rectangle. That's basically the vertical rectangular loop, and it's fed at the bottom there with 50 ohm coax. Now, as I said, the relationship between the longest and shortest sides is 2:1, and the reason I'm going to concentrate on 10 meters is because 10 meters is a very active band at the moment, and it also means you can have a very compact installation. I'll give you the detailed dimensions later in this video, but first of all, roughly, that's 12 foot, that's 6 foot, of course that's 12 foot and 6 foot down there. Now that's quite compact. The reason I've put it in feet and I'll put it in inches is because that's where the original measurements came from in some work done quite a few years ago. This vertical rectangular loop, although it's vertical in shape, it actually is horizontally polarized, and the reason it's horizontally polarized is because of the feed point. If you feed a loop at a horizontal section, then it is horizontally polarized. If you feed it at a vertical section, because you could feed it up there instead of down there, then it becomes vertically polarized. But for this purpose, on this particular one, we're going to concentrate on the horizontal feed point there, which means to say it's horizontally polarized. Because of that, you need a reasonable height. Now, reasonable on 10 meters is not very high at all. You really would want to go and try and get a quarter wave above ground, and that, believe it or not, is only 8 foot. So you have an 8 foot point there above ground. So in other words, you've got the ground there, 8 foot up, you've got this horizontal section. You go up another 12 foot, and then you've got another horizontal section. So the total height is 20 feet. And of course, this can be quite lightly built. Basically, this will be just some flex or wire, plastic coated wire. You need to fabricate a means at the top and the bottom of supporting or creating a horizontal section there. And as I said, I think at the beginning of this video, that Mike G3SED used a couple of canes, and that's quite plausible. You can go down to a local garden centre and get yourself a couple of canes, and then you need to obviously support this with a mast there. Ideally, it should be, well, I say ideally, it doesn't actually have to be fiberglass. It could be metal, because the radiating elements are running at 90 degrees to the mast, so there's not going to be too much interaction there. But because you've got this long section, it might be advisable to have a fiberglass mast, but I would see no reason why it wouldn't still work quite happily with a metal mast. There are a couple of points I'd like to make about the antenna. First of all, when you feed it, you could put a one-to-one balun at the feed point, or alternatively you could take coax directly to that feed point and wind a little bit of that coax into a coil to form a choke. You can either use a ferrite core to do that, or you can wind about 7, or probably about 5 or 6 turns will be adequate on a, say, a 2.5, 3 inch former to act as a sort of a choke come balun. But you do need something there, either a balun or a sort of the choke isolator that I mentioned, which must go at the point where the coax attaches to the antenna. The other point I'd like to make is the fact that you would expect a full wavelength of wire to be required to form the loop. But in actual fact, you need a bit more than that, because when you form a loop, you find that the formula for calculating a half wave or full wave length of wire doesn't quite hold true. So the dimensions are a bit longer than you would expect, and you'll see that when I put the dimensions up on the screen for this 10 meter antenna. And here are the dimensions. You'll see the width is less than 2 meters and the height is just over 3 meters, so that's quite manageable in even a small garden. The rectangular loop has claimed to have a gain of just under 2 dB, 1.7 dB or something like that. But let's have a look at an alternative. This alternative may be easier to install, particularly if you're going to use a single support mast. It hasn't got any gain as such, but loop antennas at low heights actually have a lower angle of radiation than a conventional dipole. So it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. But let's have a look at now a diamond loop, which, as I say, may be easier to install. It hasn't got the 1.7 dB gain, but I think you may well find it gives a better performance than a dipole at a similar height. Now, if we have a look at the diamond, you can see the attraction. It's somewhat easier antenna to install because you could easily install that using a single mast and just a couple of guys, one either side, to pull the centres out. The total height of the antenna, surprisingly, is actually half wave on 10 metres, but because you need a bit more wire on a loop than you do on a conventional half wave dipole, length for length, then the sides are pulled out and that extra length of wire is taken up. It's horizontally polarised, and as regards height above the ground, well, you know, loops do tend to have quite good low angle radiation even at modest heights. A loop antenna erected in the vertical plane, not the horizontal plane, but the vertical plane, has a tremendous advantage over a dipole at low levels. You know, there was a very interesting book published by W6SAI. He wrote a couple of very comprehensive books on beam antennas, Yagi antennas, and also on quad antennas, this one here. And the interesting fact about a loop erected in the vertical plane is it's got excellent low angle radiation at low heights. I'll give you an example that he quoted. If you have a dipole antenna at around about a quarter wave above ground, it has predominantly very high angle radiation. If you erect a vertical loop antenna, which is a loop antenna fed at the bottom so that it's got horizontal polarization, if you erect a vertical loop at about a quarter wave above ground level, it actually has an angle of radiation around about 40 degrees. So it's so much better. And he explained that the reason why a loop antenna defies gravity in respect of low angle radiation at low levels is that the upper section of the loop in conjunction with the lower section of the loop, in other words the two horizontal bits, they tend to suppress high angle radiation. So if you're looking for low angle radiation in a smallish garden where you can't erect a high antenna, consider a loop antenna fed at the bottom as a horizontally polarized antenna. That will give you a tremendous advantage over a low dipole. The only problem is, of course, it is single-banded, basically. But anyway, it's an interesting fact. Bear that in mind. Now we come to perhaps the most interesting configuration, the horizontal rectangle, because it's quite easy to erect between two masts. And it's also quite easy to make it a much larger loop without taking up too much space. But I'm going to concentrate on the 10-metre horizontal loop. So I'm going to put it on the screen now. Have a look and you can see how easy it will be to support this between two masts for a very efficient 10-metre antenna. And it doesn't have to be too high, but it would be easy to get it something like 10 or 12 feet up in the air, or the bottom section, because the height of the horizontal rectangle is not that high at all. Now you'll notice that this antenna is fed on the right hand side on the vertical section. That means to say it's vertically polarised, unlike the first one that we looked at. And the dimensions are such that it could very easily be strung between two masts or two support wires going back to the mast. And it's still, less than 4 metres long, and it is just over 2 metres high. So it's a very compact system. As regards height above the ground, well, I would suggest that provided you can get it around about 8 or 9 foot, say 2 metres above the ground, then it'll work quite well. But if you can get it higher, that would be better. The fact that it's vertically polarised means to say that it does have vertical polarisation, and therefore one would assume that it's got fairly low angle radiation, and that of course is going to be an advantage. But come what may, it is a very interesting antenna. Now both the rectangular antennas are claimed to have a forward gain of they both have a gain in both directions of about 1.7 dB. So it's not a lot of gain, but something is better than nothing. But I think the big advantage of these antennas is not only the small amount of gain and their small size, it's the fact they will give you low angle radiation. So there we are. That's the rectangular loop. By the way, I fitted the diamond one in because I thought that would make somewhat easier to install than the classic vertical rectangular loop. But I think that the horizontal rectangular loop offers a lot of possibilities, and for many it may be easier to install. I think the great thing about antennas is that you don't necessarily need to build them. Some people just get satisfaction out of seeing what is possible and understanding what is possible. But I know a lot of you would like to get out in the garden and build one. Unfortunately, we're now in the winter time here in the UK, in the northern hemisphere. Those in the southern parts of the globe will be able to get out in the garden and perhaps enjoy themselves. But you can always make a mental note and do it when the weather gets better. Mind you, we do have some good weather in the autumn and the winter. But I think it's quite an interesting antenna, and I think that with 10 metres being so good, the conditions on 10 metres being so good, and because the dimensions are so compact, it's quite easy to fit into a lot of gardens. Oh, by the way, these are continuous loops. I know when I drew them they weren't particularly wonderful, but they're continuous loops apart from where you feed them. And you can use basically any flex. I use just plastic covered multi-stranded flex, and that does the job. But the material for the antenna, provided it's wire and it conducts electricity, that's all you need. So there we are. I hope that's food for thought, and I quite enjoyed actually looking up the details. Oh, by the way, there's a very good website that contains lots and lots of information about these antennas and other similar antennas, and I'll put a link below this video to that website. You can take a look for yourself, and I promise you it's very enjoyable reading. So what's coming next? Well, I think the next video may be also about antennas, but I think it may be about angles of radiation. You know, there's a lot of antenna modelling that you see on the internet, and I'm not entirely convinced that it's always telling the truth. So I'm going to be a bit controversial in the next video and just put it open for discussion. You can tell me what you think. I'll tell you what I think, and then you can tell me whether you think I'm right or wrong. It's not a bad deal, is it? I'll tell you what I think and you tell me what you think. Until the next video, you enjoy your ham radio, you take care, and as usual, I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.